What would you do if everything around you was gold but your heart still felt empty? Imagine trading diamond necklaces for dusty aprons, penthouse suites for a shack behind a cafe, and lavish banquets for street food under the stars. What? Just to find someone who loves you, not your wealth. This is the extraordinary tale of Amina, the billionaire heiress who dared to pretend to be a poor waitress in the bustling town of Colombo, deep in the heart of modern-day Africa. Her mission: to find true love, before her secret found her first. Amina Campbell was born into a world where money could move mountains. Her family, the Campbells, owned half of Colombo, from high-rise hotels glittering in the night to booming energy companies that powered entire regions. With their name came privilege, security, and a lifetime pass to luxury. But for Amina, it also brought a cage. Despite her education in Europe and vacations in Zanzibar and Cape Town, Amina had grown tired of the fake smiles, gold-digging suitors, and plastic conversations. Every relationship she entered seemed tainted by an unspoken agenda. Men didn't fall in love with her, they fell for the idea of her fortune. "You don't know what it's like," she once told her bodyguard, Chuma, as they drove past the buzzing Colombo market. "To always wonder if someone would still look at you the same way if you were serving tea instead of sipping it." That one sentence planted a wild idea in her heart. What if she could switch lives just for a while? Strip away the diamonds, the chauffeurs, the designer dresses, and become one of the ordinary people? She pitched the idea to her mother, matron Elira Campbell, a formidable woman with political power and steel in her veins. Predictably, Elira rejected it outright. "You're a Campbell. We don't play poor. We lead." But Amina had already made up her mind. With Chuma's hesitant help, she created a second identity. Amma, a young orphan from a distant village, with only the clothes on her back and dreams in her eyes. And so, with her natural curls unpressed, her nails bare, and her accent softened, Amina Campbell walked into a dusty corner cafe called Tamu Siku, located in the poorer side of Colombo, asking for a job. The cafe owner, Mama Dunya, was skeptical. "You've never held a tray, girl?" "No, but I learn fast. And I work harder than I look," Amina replied, her voice laced with sincerity. Mama Dunya, a woman who had seen too many broken promises in her life, finally gave a reluctant nod. "1 week. No pay. Prove yourself." And just like that, the richest girl in Colombo became the newest waitress at a humble cafe where a cup of tea cost less than the polish on her old shoes. At first, Amina struggled. Her feet ached from standing, she couldn't balance a tray properly, and she flinched every time someone yelled an order. But strangely, it felt real. The sweat, the effort, the laughter between staff, and the stories exchanged after hours under the flickering bulbs, they awakened something in her soul. And then came him, Jabari. He wasn't the kind of man who turned heads with flashy clothes or fancy cars. He wore second-hand jeans and a clean shirt, and always smelled faintly of sawdust. A carpenter by trade, Jabari delivered handcrafted stools to the cafe. Every time he walked in, Amina's heart would skip, not because he was rich or powerful, but because he smiled like he meant it. Jabari noticed Amma too. She didn't talk like the other girls. There was a quiet strength behind her shy demeanor, and her questions about life, philosophy, and people surprised him. They began sharing lunch breaks. First with casual conversation about the weather, then deeper dives into their dreams. Jabari revealed he had grown up with 5 siblings, raised by a single mother, and was saving to open his own furniture shop. "I don't have much, Amma," he once said as they watched the sun set over the muddy rooftops. "But I have my word. And I believe in honest work and honest love." Amina almost cried. For the first time in years, someone had looked past her looks and seen the real her, even though it was wrapped in a lie. But lies, no matter how well-meaning, are time bombs. And trouble was brewing. One of Mama Dunya's sons had spotted Amina near the Campbell estate weeks ago, dressed in designer wear and stepping out of a luxury vehicle. He couldn't quite place her at first, but her eyes had haunted him. "Amma? Or Amina?" he mumbled to himself. As suspicion grew, Amina felt the weight of her double life pressing down. How long could she keep this up before everything shattered? And worse, what would Jabari do if he found out? In a world obsessed with status, this story dares to ask, can love survive without labels? Amina's journey is not just about finding love, it's about rediscovering humanity. She learns that humility isn't weakness, and that sometimes you must lose everything, even your name, to find what truly matters. This is just the beginning. The morning sun cast golden hues across the sprawling town of Colombo. From afar, the aroma of grilled maize and spicy akara filled the air, mingling with the earthy scent of freshly watered soil. The town was alive with its usual hustle, vendors shouting prices, children darting between wooden stalls, and the sound of drums from a nearby celebration pulsing through the narrow streets. Amara had now spent several weeks working at Mama Tun's eatery, and with each passing day she adapted more to the rhythm of an ordinary life. Her soft hands, once untouched by toil, now bore tiny calluses from lifting crates and scrubbing pots. She had traded silk blouses for simple cotton wrappers, and yet somehow she had never felt freer. What she hadn't expected was how deeply her heart would tangle with the very world she once viewed from afar. The growing bond. Chaik had become more than just a passing presence. His laughter had a warmth that echoed through her, and the way he treated her not with reverence, but with respect, gave her a strange sense of comfort. He didn't look at her as the heiress she was, because he had no idea. One afternoon, after a particularly busy lunch rush, Amara found herself resting on the back steps of the eatery, sipping palm wine from a calabash. Chaik joined her, his shirt stained with stew and his brow glistening with sweat. "You're not like the others," he said suddenly. She glanced up. "What do you mean?" "You listen. You don't act like you're better than this. Like you're here because you want to be." Amara smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." Chaik tilted his head, curious. "But why would anyone want to struggle when they don't have to?" She paused. The answer sat on her tongue, unspoken. "Because love in a palace means nothing if it's bought." Instead, she replied, "Sometimes struggle teaches us who we are." A flash of the past. While Amara was learning to love this new world, her absence back at the Mensa estate was becoming a storm of confusion and scandal. Her father, Chief Ifedeo Mensa, had launched a quiet search, ensuring the media didn't catch wind of his daughter's disappearance. But her cousin Zara, ever the schemer, was already whispering lies into powerful ears. She left because she couldn't handle responsibility, Zara cooed to board members of the Mensa conglomerate. "We need a leader who is present, who cares about our people and our legacy." Her father, torn between love and leadership, began to consider the unthinkable, appointing Zara as the interim face of the empire. The town's suspicion. Back in Colombo, not everyone was so easily convinced by Amara's new identity. A man named Kunnel, the owner of the electronics shop next door, had once worked as a low-level employee at Mensa Holdings. One day, as Amara was sweeping the front steps, he passed by and squinted. "You remind me of someone," he muttered. Amara's heart skipped. "Do I?" "Yes. The girl from those business articles. Chief Mensa's daughter." But no, she couldn't be in Colombo sweeping floors. Amara laughed it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Mama Tund, wise and warm, had begun to suspect that the girl who stirred her pots with such grace and spoke with such clarity was no ordinary village girl. But Mama said nothing. She knew that everyone had their secrets and that sometimes the truth must wait. Chaik struggled. While Amara hid a life of luxury, Chaik was battling his own demons. His younger sister Adaora had fallen ill, a rare disease that the village clinic couldn't treat. The cost of medicine from the city was far beyond what his meager earnings could cover. One evening, Amara found him sitting alone by the riverbank, head in his hands. "She's all I have left," he said, voice breaking. "I promised our parents I'd look after her." Without hesitation, Amara reached into her satchel, where she had secretly stored a portion of the emergency money she brought when she left home. She pressed a thick envelope into his hands. "Please," she said softly, "take it." Chaik stared at her, eyes wide. "Where did you get this kind of money?" "I've saved. I never spend much." He hesitated. Pride and gratitude clashed in his eyes. Then slowly he nodded. "I'll pay you back." "You don't have to." "I will," he insisted, "because I've never owed anyone anything in this life. And I won't start now." Close call. A few days later, Zara, growing suspicious that Amara might be hiding in plain sight, hired a private investigator, a man named Colonel Sephew, known for finding shadows even in the brightest daylight. He traced her last known GPS signal to somewhere near Colombo. When he arrived in town, posing as a traveling merchant, he immediately picked up whispers of a new girl in Mama Tun's eatery. A girl who spoke like a Lagos socialite but cleaned like a commoner. One afternoon, Amara was chopping onions when she looked up and saw him. His eyes locked with hers. Her blood froze. She turned quickly, hiding her face, and rushed to the back. But it was too late. Colonel Sephew had seen enough. He made a quiet call. "She's here." Personal reflection. As I watched this unfold, I couldn't help but reflect on the bravery it takes to shed one's privilege to discover the raw essence of humanity. Amara wasn't just searching for love, she was searching for truth. And Chaik, with his humility and strength, was the mirror that showed her who she could be. In many ways we all wear masks. Some are born of circumstance, others of fear. But perhaps the most courageous thing one can do is to remove the mask to be truly seen, flaws and all, and to still be loved. The night in Colombo had never felt this heavy. Crickets chirped in the background, but their rhythm was drowned out by the drumbeat of Amara's heart. She sat in the tiny room behind Mama Tun's eatery, staring at the cracked mirror on the wall. Her reflection looked foreign now. The once polished heiress was gone. In her place stood a girl with dust on her feet, flour in her hair, and fear in her eyes. Colonel Sephew had found her. That much she was sure of. But what terrified her more wasn't being dragged back to the glittering prisons of her father's mansion. No, it was Chaik. The way he had looked at her earlier when she hesitated to answer a simple question. "Who was that man staring at you today?" She had brushed it off. But the doubt had already started to seep into his eyes. The lie that grew too deep. From the beginning, her plan had seemed simple: hide in plain sight, strip herself of wealth, and find someone who loved her, not her name. But now that plan was fraying. Each kind word she'd shared with Chaik, every moment they spent in the quiet corners of Colombo, had been built on a lie. And the lie wasn't just hers anymore, it had wrapped around his life too. The money she gave him had paid for Adeora's medicine. It had bought hope. But what would happen when he found out where that money came from? Would it all be tainted? Would she be tainted? Amara sank to the floor, hands shaking. Mama Tun's warning. The next morning, Mama Tun found her before sunrise, scrubbing pots that were already clean. "You are not just running from others, child," Mama said quietly. "You are running from yourself." Amara stopped. "I know who you are," Mama continued, not unkindly. "I've known since the first day you stepped into my shop and said please, like it was a foreign word." Amara opened her mouth to protest, but Mama Tun held up a hand. "I'm not here to judge. I've served men with gold in their teeth and rot in their hearts. You are different. But you must decide now, will you keep running, or will you fight for the truth?" Chaik's discovery. That afternoon, as the heat of Colombo pressed down like a wet blanket, Chaik walked into the local post office, a dusty, near-forgotten place, to send a letter to a friend in the city. While waiting in line, his eyes drifted to a newspaper left behind on the counter. On the front page, "Billionaire heiress still missing. Chief Ifedeo Mensa offers 10 million naira reward." Chaik froze. There, in grainy black and white, was a photo of Amara, dressed in elegant attire, but unmistakably the same girl who now served jollof in a roadside eatery. His hands trembled. He left the post office without sending his letter. The entire walk home, memories replayed the strange way Amara always counted money too fast, how she spoke perfect English with occasional slips of French, how she once referred to Lagos traffic like someone who'd actually driven in it. It all made sense now, and it made him sick. Confrontation. That night, Amara returned from the market to find Chaik waiting by the river, the same spot where she had once comforted him. "I saw the paper," he said without turning around. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her then, his eyes no longer warm. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "I wanted to. Every day. But the more time passed, the harder it became." Chaik laughed bitterly. "You said you wanted to know what love feels like. But how can you find love when everything you gave me was fake?" "Not everything," she said quickly. "The way I felt with you, the things we talked about, the way you made me feel like I wasn't just someone's daughter, that was real." He looked away. "You paid for my sister's medicine. That means I owe you." "No," she stepped closer. "I didn't help you because I'm rich. I helped you because I care. That has nothing to do with money." He was silent for a long time before speaking. "Then tell me something real, Amara. Not the waitress, not the heiress. Just you." And in that moment, Amara told him everything. About her mother's death. About her loneliness inside golden walls. About Zara's thirst for control. About why she ran. She cried as she spoke, and when she finished, there was nothing left to hide behind. "I understand why you ran," Chaik said finally. "But you can't keep running anymore." He turned to leave. "Does this mean it's over?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He paused. "I don't know." Colonel Sefu's trap. While emotions churned between Amara and Chaik, Colonel Sefu made his move. He visited Mama Tun's that evening, pretending to be a wealthy businessman looking to invest in local food chains. Amara recognized him instantly. But what chilled her was the way he looked around, smiling at the patrons as if calculating the damage he could do. That night she found a note slipped under the door. "Come to the old railway station at midnight. Come alone, or your friend gets hurt." Her hands shook as she clutched the paper. It was Zara. Only she would be bold enough to turn threats into riddles. She had to decide: stay in hiding and keep Kalambo safe, or return to the world she had fled and face whatever storm Zara had prepared. Personal reflection. This story, it's more than just love. It's about identity. About how far we're willing to go to be truly seen. Amara wanted love without conditions. But to receive that love, she first had to stop lying to herself. And Chaik? His pain wasn't in the lie alone. It was in the fact that she didn't trust him with her truth. Trust, after all, is not built on appearances, it's born from vulnerability. Midnight in Kalambo had always been still, save for the occasional owl or the distant hoot of a bush train. But this night was different. There was a sharpness in the air, a quiet tension, like the silence before a thunderstorm. Amara stood alone in the shadows of the abandoned railway station, clutching the note that had summoned her. The yellowed paper crinkled in her fist, damp from the sweat of anxiety. The message was clear: come alone or Chaik gets hurt. She had no idea how deep Zara's reach had stretched. But if the warning was real, and knowing her half-sister's penchant for cruelty, it most certainly was, then Chaik's life might already be in danger. Her time had run out. A trap sprung from gold. The railway station loomed like a carcass of old progress, rusted tracks swallowed by weeds, a crumbling station house missing half its roof, and shattered windows that looked like open mouths frozen mid-scream. As Amara stepped into the darkness, a voice echoed from within. Well, if it isn't the Princess of Shadows." It was Colonel Sefu. She recognized the smug arrogance in his tone immediately. He stepped out from behind a cracked pillar, dressed in a pristine white linen suit, the kind only men who didn't do their own dirty work wore. "Where is he?" Amara demanded. Sefu smiled and signaled. Two of his men dragged a figure into the moonlight. It was Chaik, bound, bruised and gagged but alive. Amara's knees buckled. "You've made quite the name for yourself," Sephew said, circling her. "The whole country believes you're dead. Meanwhile, you're playing waitress in Kalambo? How poetic. What do you want?" "Simple," he said. "Come back with us quietly. Sign a statement handing over all shares of your father's businesses to Zara. And maybe, just maybe, your boyfriend walks away with all his limbs." Amara's jaw clenched. "You know that's illegal." Sephew laughed. "Sweetheart, when has that ever stopped us? The courage to surrender or stand." Amara looked at Chaik, whose eyes pleaded with her not to give in. But what choice did she have? She stepped forward. "Let him go. I'll do it." "No!" Chaik screamed through the gag. Sephew snapped his fingers. One of the goons pressed a gun to Chaik's temple. But before Amara could sign anything, headlights burst through the darkness. A rickety pickup truck skidded into the station courtyard, its engine growling. Out jumped Mama Tund, and to Amara's shock, Officer Dowdy, the local policeman who rarely left his tea shop. "Put the gun down," Dowdy shouted, brandishing his pistol. "You're under arrest, Sephew." Chaos erupted. Sephew's men reached for their weapons, but Dowdy fired a warning shot that sent them scattering. Mama Tund rushed to Chaik, slashing his bonds with a kitchen knife. Amara stood frozen as Sephew turned to run. She chased after him. Years of pent-up rage, betrayal, and grief surged through her legs. She caught up just as he reached the train tracks. "You ruined my family," she hissed. "You were never meant for power," he snarled, lunging at her. But Amara dodged and with a push, sent him tumbling onto the rusted tracks. Before he could rise, Dowdy caught up, cuffs in hand. "It's over," Amara whispered. In the aftermath, at dawn, as the sun lit up the hills of Kalambo, Amara sat quietly on the steps of Mama Tund's shop. Chaik joined her, his lips split but his spirit intact. "You didn't have to come after me," he said softly. "I did," she replied, "because for the first time in my life, I had someone worth fighting for." They sat in silence for a long while. "Is it true?" Chaik asked finally. "Zara wants your father's empire?" Amara nodded. "And she'll try again. This was only one chapter. But you're not alone anymore." She looked at him, surprised. "I was angry," he admitted. "Not because you were rich, but because you didn't trust me with the truth. That hurt more than anything." "I'm sorry," she said. "I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you'd stop seeing me." "I see you now," he said. "All of you." They smiled. It was small, but it was real. The town changed. News of the incident spread through Kalambo like wildfire. For some, Amara became a local legend, the billionaire who cooked stew and swept floors. For others, she was a reminder that even the high and mighty could bleed, could fear, could fall in love. Mama Tund resumed business as usual, although now she insisted on calling Amara her investment partner. Officer Dowdy, hailed as a hero, finally got the funding he'd begged for years to improve Kalambo's safety. And as for Amara and Chaik, they stayed. For now. Not because they had to, but because Kalambo had become more than a hiding place. It was home. Personal reflection. This part of the story hit me hard. It's not just about dramatic confrontations or daring rescues. It's about choice. Amara had to choose between surrendering her freedom or risking everything to protect someone she loved. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop running. The pain of betrayal, the burden of truth, the cost of love, they're all tangled. But only when we face them can we ever be free. Amara stood up for herself, not because she had nothing to lose, but because she finally knew who she was without the wealth, the lies, and the fear. The days after Sephew's arrest were filled with cautious hope. Kalambo returned to its rhythm, slow, steady, and warm like the red soil beneath its feet. But beneath that surface, tension brewed like thunderclouds just beyond the hills. Amara knew peace was only a brief pause in the storm, because Zara had not yet made her move, and when she did, it would be nothing short of war. the calm before the hurricane. Amara sat at the wooden table behind Mama Tun's kitchen, flipping through her father's old notebooks. The handwriting was neat, elegant, full of plans for community investments, blueprints for clinics, ideas for scholarships. Her father had been more than a businessman. He had dreamed of lifting everyone around him. But those dreams had died with him, or so she thought. Zara wants to erase all this, Amara whispered, anger stirring her voice. To turn my father's legacy into a playground for her greed. Chaik walked in, wiping his hands on a towel. Then you'll stop her. She has lawyers, media control, political allies. What do I have? Chaik smiled. You've got Colombo. And me. It wasn't just a romantic gesture. He meant it. The people of Colombo had seen her fight. And slowly, quietly, they were beginning to stand behind her. Still, it wasn't enough. Not yet. Zara's return, the Queen in Black. When Zara finally arrived in Colombo, she didn't slink in like a criminal. She landed in a private chopper, stepped out in designer heels, and waved at the cameras she brought with her. Her return was televised. She posed next to school children and handed out food packages all branded with the logo of Mensa Holdings. Her PR team called it the return of the heir. But behind the smiles, her eyes were calculating, sharp enough to cut through steel. Amara watched it all on an old TV at Mama Tun's. She's using the company's wealth to buy love, Chaik muttered. No, Amara corrected. She's trying to rewrite history. And it was working. A week after Zara's arrival, local newspapers ran glowing articles about her philanthropy. Billboards appeared with her face and slogans like, "Empowering Colombo, one dream at a time." No one mentioned Sefio. No one mentioned the attempted kidnapping. Silence, bought and paid for. Zara was playing chess on a board Amara barely had the pieces for. The legal bombshell. Then came the final blow. Zara's legal team filed a petition to have Amara officially declared dead. If approved, Zara would assume full control of all remaining assets and businesses. The court hearing was in just 10 days. Amara stared at the legal documents, disbelief choking her throat. She's trying to bury me alive. She's betting you won't go public, Chaik said. That you'll stay in hiding like always. But if I come forward, Amara trailed off. The danger was obvious. Zara wouldn't stop with legal tactics if they failed. Still, there was no choice. She had to fight. Not just for herself, but for her father's legacy. For the people who still believed in decency. For Colombo. For love. A plan begins. That night, Amara sat with Mama Tund, Chaik, and Officer Dowdy under the mango tree behind the shop. We need to get her in front of the public, Dowdy said. Let them see she's alive. But not just alive, Mama Tund added. Powerful, purposeful, the real heir. They hatched a plan, a bold, dangerous one. They would organize a people's hearing in Colombo, an open-air forum where Amara would publicly present evidence of Zara's crimes, unveil the truth about her father's murder, and claim her rightful place. It wasn't legal, but it would be seen. If enough people came, if they listened, then perhaps the Real courts would follow. But that meant Amara would have to tell her whole story, in front of everyone, and Zara would fight back. A knife in the dark. 2 nights before the people's hearing, Amara was walking home from the market alone when she noticed the shadow. At first it moved like any passerby, but then it stopped when she stopped. Turned when she turned. Her heart raced. She ducked into an alley, hoping to lose her tail. Suddenly, arms grabbed her from behind. A voice whispered, "Walk away, or you'll end up like your father." She twisted, slammed her heel into the attacker's shin, and bolted. She didn't stop running until she reached Mama Tun's house. As she collapsed inside, Chaik caught her. "They sent someone," she gasped. "Zara knows." They had crossed the line. Now there was no turning back. Reflections before the storm. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moonlight stretch across Colombo's sleeping streets. Her thoughts were a storm of doubt and determination. Zara had money, power, connections. But Amara had truth. And if she didn't speak now, she'd never forgive herself. Sometimes the greatest power comes not from wealth but from the courage to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, Kalambo was ready to see her. Personal insights. This part of Amara's journey reminds me of something we often forget. Truth has a cost. And telling it, especially when facing powerful liars, can be terrifying. But there is strength in standing up. Even when you shake, even when your voice breaks, Amara could have stayed in the shadows. She had every reason to. But when the people around her began to really believe, she found the courage to rise. And that is the heartbeat of every revolution. Kalambo had never seen anything like it. The open square in front of the old colonial courthouse was packed not with officials or lawyers, but with farmers, teachers, market women, and curious children clinging to their mothers' wraps. Word had spread like wildfire. The dead heiress was alive. And tonight she would speak. There were no microphones, no media vans, just a wooden platform, a few chairs, and a single determined voice. The gathering storm. The people's hearing wasn't recognized by any court in the land, but it didn't need to be. The people of Kalambo had their own sense of justice, forged by hardship and sharpened by survival. Mama Tund walked among the crowd with jugs of chilled hibiscus drink, calming nerves and sharing smiles. Chike stood near the stage, scanning for threats. Officer Dowdy had placed 3 trusted constables among the crowd, plain clothes, but alert. They all knew what was at stake. Zara would not sit idly and watch her empire unravel. And Amara, she was the thread. She stepped up to the platform, dressed simply, not in designer clothes, not in symbols of wealth, but in a deep blue dress her mother once wore. It fluttered in the breeze like a memory reborn. The crowd fell silent. Then she spoke, the voice of the forgotten. "My name is Amara Noko," she began, voice steady but soft. "And I am the daughter of Emmanuel Noko, founder of Mensa Holdings, and son of Kalambo's soil." There was a ripple of gasps. "For years you believed I had died, that I drowned on the river bend near Nyoni Cliffs. But the truth is, I was hidden, raised in secret. And now I return not for revenge but for justice." She held up a worn notebook, her father's. "This contains his vision, his plans to bring light to this town, to empower its children, to heal its sick. That dream is under threat, not by strangers but by blood." Amara went on to recount Zara's manipulation, the forged signatures, the locked bank accounts, the silencing of voices, and Sefu's failed kidnapping. The crowd murmured with each revelation. Some wept. Others clenched fists. She ended with a promise. "If Kalambo still believes in truth, then stand with me. Not for power, not for money, but for what is right." For a moment there was only silence. Then Mama Tun stepped forward and stood beside her. Then Chek. Then Officer Dowdy. Then one by one dozens, then hundreds stepped forward. Until Amara stood no longer alone. Zara's countermove. But Zara was ready. The next morning, news outlets across the country released a video, grainy footage of Amara in a village tavern, scrubbing floors and serving drinks. The headline? Imposter heiress or clever actress? They painted her as a fraud, a clever con woman pretending to be the lost heiress. Zara herself appeared on national TV, offering compassion for Amara's mental delusions. "She is not my sister," she said tearfully. "She is a danger to herself and to the company." Amara watched it all from Chike's house, hands trembling. "They're flipping the script," Chike muttered. "They're trying to erase me again," Amara whispered. But the seed had been planted. The people's hearing had gone viral on local networks. The video was shared via WhatsApp, radio shows, and blogs run by university students hungry for truth. And truth is hard to bury twice. The unexpected ally. Just when it seemed Zara's media storm might succeed, an unexpected voice emerged. A former board member of Mensa Holdings, a retired woman named Agnes Obote, released a statement. "I knew Emmanuel Noko. That girl on the platform is his daughter. And Zara has blood on her hands." The internet exploded. Agnes released old letters, emails, and even a voice recording from Emmanuel's final year, a message to Amara that had never been delivered. "If you ever see this, my sweet child, know that I never abandoned you. I did what I had to do to protect you. They're coming for everything and only you can carry the dream forward." Amara listened to the voice of her father through tears. It was the final proof. She didn't just belong to the legacy. She was the legacy. The turning tide. Suddenly, public opinion shifted. Blogs hailed Amara as the Hidden Heiress of Kalambo. Protest signs appeared in cities reading, "Let her speak," and "Justice for Noko." Law students in the capital offered to help her build a case. Mama Tun's shop became an impromptu headquarters with volunteers pouring in daily. Young coders, journalists, even a former prosecutor came to offer help. But as Amara's world expanded, so did the danger. A warning in flames. One night, as the volunteers were sleeping in mats behind the shop, a fire broke out. A bottle had been thrown through the window wrapped in cloth and soaked in fuel. If not for Chaik's quick thinking, the whole place would have gone up in flames. They saved the people. But they lost everything inside, including her father's notebook. Gone. Amara stood before the ashes as the dawn broke, her face streaked with smoke and sorrow. Zara had just sent a message. "If I can't destroy your name, I'll destroy your hope." But Amara wasn't afraid anymore. She had already walked through fire once. She would do it again. Because what they were building now was bigger than inheritance. It was bigger than revenge. It was a movement. Personal insights. There's something deeply powerful about truth spoken not in courts, but in marketplaces. Not in suits, but in sandals. What Amara did at the people's hearing was more than bold, it was historic. She reminded us that justice isn't always wrapped in legal jargon. Sometimes it's the quiet voice of a village girl telling the world, "I exist. I remember. I matter." And that voice can shake mountains. Blood doesn't always make you family. And sometimes it's family that cuts the deepest. Kalambo was still smoldering from the flames, the literal fire that had devoured Mama Tun's shop, and the symbolic fire spreading across the nation. But out of that charred ruin, something powerful rose. Hope. Because what Zara hadn't expected was that the people would choose memory over money, legacy over lies, and one girl's courage over an empire built on manipulation. Now, Amara had something even stronger than the stolen notebook. The truth finally heard. A message from the grave. The leaked audio of Emmanuel Noko had reached every corner of the country. Radio stations played it between news updates. University lectures dissected it alongside their ethics curriculum. Old men listened in silence and nodded, whispering, "He was right. This girl carries his soul." But the most important reaction came from an unexpected place. Chief Omandi, one of the most respected elders in the capital. He hadn't spoken publicly in nearly a decade, but when he did, his words mattered. "I was there when Emmanuel Noko first broke ground on the Kalambo Tech Park. I saw what he was building. If his daughter still walks among us, then we owe it to him, and to the future of this land, to listen." His blessing changed everything. Suddenly, Amara's supporters weren't just villagers and students, they were lawyers, professors, retired judges, and journalists. And for the first time, Zara felt something she hadn't in years. Fear. Entering the lion's den. "I'm going to the capital," Amara said quietly. Chaik's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. "Are you sure? If I want justice, I have to take the fight to her ground." She wasn't just talking about court. Zara had filed a restraining order, accusing Amara of harassment and fraud. It was a trap, of course, a legal maneuver to discredit Amara before she could file her own claim. But Amara wasn't walking in blind. She had the backing of Kalambo's people, a growing team of volunteer lawyers, and the voice of her father echoing louder than ever before. Still, stepping into the Capitol felt like walking into the mouth of the lion. The courtroom showdown begins. The day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse was a gleaming building of glass and steel, modern, cold, intimidating. Cameras lined the entrance and security was tight. But Amara didn't flinch. She walked in wearing a simple navy suit donated by a retired journalist who believed in her. She didn't need a stylist. She didn't need a PR team. She had the truth. Zara, in contrast, arrived flanked by lawyers, PR specialists, and bodyguards. She wore sunglasses even inside the courtroom, a calculated move to seem aloof, unbothered. But her fingers trembled slightly when Amara stood and made her opening statement. "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to reclaim what was stolen. Not money, not buildings, but identity, legacy, and the right to tell my story." The judge listened. The people watched. The battle had begun, a twist from within. But as the legal tides began to shift in Amara's favor, betrayal struck. One of Amara's closest allies, a junior lawyer named Lebo, who had helped her prepare much of her documentation, suddenly disappeared. Then, the next morning, Zara's team presented confidential strategy notes. The exact ones Amara's team had written. Lebo had flipped. Not just for money but for something worse. He was Zara's half-cousin, hidden within Amara's team like a serpent in the grass. Amara was devastated. "I trusted him," she whispered to Chaik. "You trusted with your heart," Chaik said. "That's not a weakness. That's what makes you different from her." But inside, Amara knew the fight had just gotten bloodier. She couldn't afford to lose again. A crisis of faith. For the first time since stepping into the public eye, Amara wavered. Sitting alone in her guest room, away from cameras, she pulled out the remaining piece of her father's memory, a single photo salvaged from the fire. It showed her as a baby in Emmanuel's arms, laughing in front of the half-built Colombo Tech Park. "What would you do if you were me?" she whispered to the photo. And somehow, deep in her bones, she knew the answer. "Finish what I started." The counterstrike. Amara returned to court the next morning with renewed resolve. Her legal team had recovered not just emotionally but strategically. They brought in Dr. Amos Obeng, an independent forensic accountant, who had quietly reviewed Mensa Holdings' books for years before retiring. His testimony stunned the courtroom. There are over 17 million in missing funds, routed through shell companies tied to Zara Mensa. And it began 2 months after Emmanuel Noko's supposed death. The courtroom erupted. Zara's legal team tried to object, but the damage was done. The media pounced. Hashtags exploded. Headlines screamed, "Heiress exposed? Stolen legacy in courtroom clash. Daughter of Colombo strikes back." Zara stormed out of the courthouse that day without giving a statement. Amara had landed her first real blow. But the war wasn't over. A nation watching. What began as a private inheritance dispute had become a national reckoning. Talk shows debated Zara's ethics. Youth groups posted side-by-side videos of Amara speaking at the People's Hearing and Zara at her press conferences. The difference was undeniable. One spoke from the heart. The other spoke from a throne made of mirrors. And slowly the court of public opinion turned. Even some of Zara's former allies, celebrities, business partners began to distance themselves. One prominent investor tweeted, "I believed in Zara's vision. But Amara carries something more powerful: integrity." In every great story there's a moment when the hero feels alone, cornered, and betrayed. But the difference between a hero and a victim is not who suffers more, it's who keeps walking. Amara kept walking. She lost a team member, nearly lost her case, and came face to face with her worst fears. But she didn't run. She rose. And in doing so, she reminded us all, the fight for truth is never won in comfort. It's forged in fire. The truth doesn't tremble in the dark, it waits. The courthouse in the heart of Ndala City had seen trials that rocked nations, but none quite like this. What started as a dispute over inheritance had now grown into a reckoning, one that would decide not just who owned the legacy of the late Emmanuel Noko, but who truly had the right to write Kalambo's future. And in the eye of the storm stood Amara, no longer the quiet waitress in dusty aprons, no longer the girl afraid of shadows, but a woman made of flame and thunder. But thunder brings lightning, and lightning reveals everything. The witness no one expected. The 8th day of the trial began like the rest, buzzing crowds, tense murmurs, a heavy security presence. But when the judge called the next witness, the entire courtroom gasped. Because stepping into the box was Yemi Bako, Emmanuel Noko's former personal driver. Everyone thought he had disappeared years ago. Rumors claimed he'd died. Others whispered he'd been paid to vanish. But here he was, gaunt, older but sharp-eyed. His voice quivered with age but not fear. I drove Mr. Noko the night he died. Except, he didn't die that night. A breathless silence followed. Yemi's testimony was like pulling open an old, locked tomb. Emmanuel had discovered Zara's financial betrayal months before his supposed accident. He'd planned to confront her, strip her of power, and leave everything to Amara. But he never got the chance. On the night of their confrontation, Yemi drove Emmanuel to the estate, but the next morning, Zara claimed he'd died in a fire. There was no body, Yemi whispered. Only ashes and silence. The conspiracy unfolds. Yemi's statement cracked the foundation of Zara's entire defense. Up until now, she had claimed full legitimacy through legal documentation and presumed death. But now the court had a voice recording of Emmanuel revealing his doubts. A witness claiming he never died in that fire. Financial records showing illegal transfers. Zara's empire was beginning to rot from the inside. Her lawyers scrambled. They claimed Yemi was mentally unstable, coerced, or seeking revenge. But Amara's team countered with medical reports, old security footage, and most damning of all, a notarized letter, dated just 1 week before Emmanuel's disappearance. Read, "If anything happens to me, ensure my daughter Amara receives this. She must know the truth. Kalambo belongs to her, not to the ones who traded their soul for gold." The letter was signed. The handwriting matched. And for the first time, Zara looked cornered. A battle behind the scenes. But snakes don't die easy. That evening, just hours after court adjourned, Amara received a message on her private phone. "Come alone. Abandoned train yard. Midnight. Or the truth dies with me." The message was unsigned, but it came from a known number. Lebo, the former ally who betrayed her. Chike was furious. "It's a trap." "It might be," Amara admitted. "But it might also be the last piece of the puzzle." Against every warning she went. What she found was both horrifying and liberating. Lebo, bruised and paranoid, had fled Zara's camp. He was ready to confess on camera. "I was told to leak your plans. I did it for money. But then I saw what she did, to people like Yemi, to those who spoke out. I couldn't carry it anymore." His confession was raw. He named names. He gave locations. He provided access to Zara's offshore accounts. It was the nail in the coffin. Amara didn't thank him. She simply looked him in the eyes and said, "You should have stayed loyal. Not to me. To the truth." The final week of trial. With Lebo's confession, the courtroom became a crucible. Zara's empire, once untouchable, was now bleeding from every side. More witnesses came forward. A former board member who was paid off. An estate worker who saw Zara burn personal files. A maid who overheard the confrontation between Emmanuel and Zara the night he disappeared. The judge ordered a forensic audit of all family assets. And in the public square, thousands gathered daily, chanting, holding signs, painting murals of Emmanuel and Amara side by side. Zara's name became poison. Even her elite friends began to vanish. But just when Amara thought justice was near, Zara made her final move. The poison of power. On the last day of trial, Zara did something no one expected. She admitted to manipulating accounts. She acknowledged her feud with Emmanuel. She even shed a tear in front of the cameras. "I never wanted this," she said. "I only wanted to protect what I helped build. I raised Amara. I loved her like my own." A wave of sympathy rippled through the press. Was this remorse? Or a masterclass in manipulation? Amara, watching from the other side of the courtroom, didn't flinch. "She cries when caught. But she never cried when she erased my name." The judge, wise to the performance, remained neutral. But the jury, the nation, now had the burden of truth. The truth stormed the stage uninvited, unashamed, unstoppable. It reminded us that the past has a way of echoing forward, that lies may outrun honesty for a time, but they always grow tired. Amara's courage wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in every decision not to stoop to Zara's level. In every choice to let evidence speak louder than anger. And when the dust of this trial settles, no matter the verdict, the people will remember who stood unshaken. Justice may wear a blindfold, but truth always sees. The air in Dala City was different now. Gone were the whispers. Gone were the doubts. In their place, tension so thick it pulsed in the walls of every courtroom, every news channel, every street corner cafe. Because today was the day. After weeks of shocking testimonies, leaked documents, dramatic confessions, and secrets unearthed from the ashes of betrayal, the jury would deliver their verdict. But beneath the legal battle, a deeper war had been raging. And even as justice loomed on the horizon, vultures were circling. The calm before the storm. Amara stood outside the courthouse before sunrise, dressed in a simple white dress, a symbol of peace, resilience, and mourning. Chaik stood beside her, silent but solid, a shield in human form. Around them, a sea of supporters had gathered, workers from the Colombo estates, elders from nearby villages, even children holding flowers and signs that read, "Give the land back to the blood that birthed it." The energy was electric, but Amara? She was strangely still. "Whether I win or lose," she said softly to Chaik, "I already reclaimed what mattered, my truth." But he knew. She wanted justice. Not revenge, but accountability. And today that dream was about to be tested. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered. The jury filed in. Zara sat across the room, perfectly styled, a mask of elegance hiding the decay within. She looked smaller than usual. Not physically but symbolically. Her empire had shrunk to this one courtroom. Her lawyers whispered strategies, but her eyes stayed fixed on Amara. "You think this makes you better?" She had once hissed. "All you have is a name. I built this with my blood." But it wasn't just about names anymore. It was about legacy. And legacies are forged in fire, not forged by fire. The jury foreperson stood. "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict." The verdict? The room fell into absolute silence. Not a breath. Not a cough. Even the cameras stopped humming. In the matter of contested inheritance and illegal acquisition of the estate of Emmanuel Noko, we, the jury, find in favor of Amara Noko. Gasp. Cheers. Sobs. Amara stood frozen, like she couldn't believe it. Like even victory felt surreal after so much struggle. But Chaik grabbed her hand. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought the truth home." Zara slumped in her seat. Not fainting. Not crying. Just defeated. For the first time, the world saw the cracks beneath her crown. The judge continued. "The court orders the immediate return of all assets illegally acquired. Zara Noko will face separate criminal charges regarding fraud, attempted cover-up, and obstruction of justice." The vultures, sensing fresh blood, descended. Journalists surged. Flashbulbs exploded. But Amara didn't raise her fists. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Papa. I kept your promise." The aftershock. Victory doesn't end the war, it only starts the cleanup. Over the next few weeks, Amara began reclaiming the Colombo estates. She visited every plantation, every school, every community project that had been shut down or poisoned by greed. She met with tribal elders and chiefs. She asked for forgiveness for the silence of her lineage. And more than anything, she listened. Because healing can't be commanded. It must be invited. Meanwhile, Zara had vanished from the public eye. Her properties were frozen. Her name stripped from the Noko Foundation. Her friends? Scattered. But something told Amara. Zara wasn't done. A fire in the shadows. One night, weeks after the verdict, Amara received a package. Inside, a single photograph. It showed her and Chike outside the courthouse circled in red ink, and scrawled in angry black handwriting beneath it. The jungle remembers its own. You only won a battle. The war isn't over. No signature. But she didn't need one. Zara had left a scar too deep to forget. And now, someone or something was still playing the game. The return to the ancestral land. Despite the threat, Amara made a public statement. I will not lead in fear. Kalambo's soil runs through my veins, and I will plant new roots in its name. She organized a massive community ceremony, a return to Emmanuel Noko's village, where she would officially be anointed as heir in the traditional rites. Drummers played. Dancers wept. Elders blessed her with palm oil and prayer. And as she knelt before the sacred tree of her ancestors, a young girl approached her no more than 9 years old. My papa says you're like Queen Zinga, she whispered. He says queens don't run from snakes. They stomp them. Amara smiled, tears finally falling. Then let's stomp. Personal reflection. Part 9 reminds us that justice is never truly complete. You can win in court, win in truth, win in public opinion, and still face enemies in the dark. But what defines a leader, a legacy, a lionheart is not whether threats disappear, but whether we face them anyway. Amara's victory wasn't just about reclaiming land. It was about reclaiming dignity. And in doing so, she became something more than an heiress. She became a symbol. Some are born into power. Others rise through fire. But the rarest of all are those who become power itself. A new dawn in Kalambo. The golden sun rose over the hills of Kalambo. Its rays touched the fields first, the once abandoned farmlands now reborn under Amara's stewardship. The plantations were buzzing again, but not with the exploitative labor of the past. This time, workers were partners owning shares, making decisions, rebuilding with dignity. At the heart of it all stood Amara, no longer just the girl who once hid in a waitress's uniform. She was now the matriarch of Kalambo. But with power came shadow. Because peace, though earned, is never permanent. And in the distance, something stirred. A shadow returns. Despite her criminal conviction, Zara had evaded prison with a technical loophole and vanished. No passport activity, no digital trace. But rumors whispered she'd fled to a nearby country, gathering allies, laundering funds, promising revenge on the bastard who stole her throne. Amara was warned. Her advisors, even Chike, urged her to increase security, stay behind guarded gates, prepare for retaliation. But she refused to lead through fear. If I hide now, she told Chike, then she still wins. So she walked the fields, held town hall meetings, visited schools and hospitals armed only with presence, purpose, and the people's love. Still, deep inside she felt it. The war wasn't over. The invitation. It came in the form of a black envelope. No name. No return address. Inside, a map of the old Noko mining site, the one Zara had used to funnel illegal money. Marked in blood-red ink was a single word. Come. It was a trap, clearly. But it was also a challenge. And Amara was done running. The final confrontation. Under cover of darkness, Amara arrived at the old mine, accompanied only by Chike and 2 trusted guards. The place was abandoned, a relic of greed and silence. But inside, lit by a flickering torch, stood Zara. No longer elegant. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by survivalist gear. Her hair was wild, eyes burning with obsession. You came alone, Zara sneered. Foolish. You could have ruled beside me. You had the name, the blood. You could have kept everything, but instead, you gave it to peasants. Amara didn't flinch. Power that crushes others is not power. It's weakness dressed in gold. Zara lunged, but Chaik intercepted. A scuffle broke out. Shots rang in the distance. One of the guards took a hit. But in the chaos, Amara stepped forward and did something no one expected. She didn't fight. She offered Zara her hand. End this. Surrender. Let me help you reclaim what humanity you still have. Zara stared at her. Broken. Bloody. Cornered. And for a split second, just a second, she looked like she might accept. But snakes don't shed their venom. With a final scream, Zara tried to stab Amara. And this time, it was Chaik who acted. One swift blow. Zara collapsed. Breathing. Alive. But defeated. Truly, finally defeated. The lioness crowned. Weeks passed. Zara was extradited and imprisoned in a maximum security facility. Amara was awarded not just legal victory but global recognition. International human rights organizations praised her reforms in Kalambo. Investors poured into her ethical farming cooperatives. Scholarships were launched in Emmanuel Noko's name. But Amara didn't gloat. She returned to the ancestral tree and sat with the village elders. I have power now, she said, but I ask for wisdom. One elder replied, then you already rule better than most. And so, with quiet strength, Amara became not just the hidden heiress, but the lioness who rose. Personal reflections and life lessons. This story, though fictional, holds mirrors to real struggles, especially across Africa. It speaks to the legacy of stolen inheritance, not just land, but voice, culture, and dignity. The pain of family betrayal, and how healing often comes not through revenge, but justice. The power of integrity over ambition, that who you are means more than what you own. And above all, the truth that leadership is service, not domination. Amara's journey reminds us, your origin doesn't define your destiny. Your choices do. To everyone watching this, have you ever felt unseen? Like your truth didn't matter? Like your story was buried under someone else's version? Let Amara's journey remind you the world may silence you temporarily, but truth always finds light. So don't wait to be crowned. Rise. Lead. Roar. If this story moved you, share it. Let the spirit of Kalambo reach beyond the screen. Subscribe for more powerful stories from Africa and beyond. Comment your thoughts. What would you have done in Amara's place? Like the video if you believe in justice, dignity, and the rise of unsung heroes. And hit the bell because the next story might just be yours. Thank you for watching The Hidden Heiress of Kalambo, where truth, fire, and a lioness met destiny.